So, as you will discover, it turns out that librarians have not always been fierce defenders of intellectual freedom, and at one point in our history, happily led the charge to the furnace door to destroy seditious and unpatriotic literature. This occasionally is the cause for much consternation when librarians who did not learn this somewhere along the line get in over their heads in a conversation with somebody who does know some of the history of our profession. A friend of mine, in a moment of madness, spent a term on the council of the American Library Association. There was a row of some sort over matters of intellectual freedom, and somebody on the council email discussion list claimed that librarians have always been defenders of intellectual freedom. My friend had to educate the individual, and as it turned out, about half the council on the topic. Oh joy. But that, in terms of this week, is not really central to the course. What is central is coming to grips, or starting to come to grips, with Gramsci's notion of cultural hegemony. The lecture is fairly broad brush and a very rapid read on the topic. You have, I trust, been working your way through the readings assigned in the syllabus and can fill in a good deal of the detail and thought that I have left out of the lecture. The salient points, I think, are summed up in the phrase describing the power of the state as hegemony armored by coercion. Most students of Gramsci would argue that if the state has to resort to coercion, it has failed sufficiently in encouraging the spontaneous consent of the dominated classes. Spontaneous consent is what keeps us, by and large, from asking too many questions about the way things are. Consider some of the material from the Tony Judd article I had you read. Among other items was this, and I'm quoting here, "Today, the CEO of Walmart earns 900 times the wages of his average employee. Indeed, the wealth of the Walmart founder's family in 2005 was estimated at about the same $90 billion as that of the bottom 40% of the U.S. population, 120 million people. One family having more wealth than 120 million people in this country, and nobody asks questions." My view of this may be colored a bit by having lived in exile in Columbia, Missouri for 6 years, the same town where two of Sam Walton's nieces and their families live. It was not a pretty picture. Libraries, schools, museums, and many other cultural institutions are agencies, by and large, of the state. We who work in those institutions are essentially intellectuals in the service of the state. I would go so far as to say agents of the state, dependent on the state to maintain our institutions and, our salaries. How many potentially embarrassing questions are we going to be asking on any given day? How much counter-hegemonic behavior are we going to engage in? Contemplate what Harris was saying, or wonder if Van Slyke's observation doesn't apply just as well now as the period about which he was writing. Are we really class blind, or do we just like to think we are? Food for thought, I hope.